Yeah, I think that that was the real lesson was that unconsciously I didn't feel safe enough to say no to people. And so when I got overwhelmed and it was just too much and I had given too much, my body would get sick and then I couldn't do it. So, sorry, I can't do that thing that you need me to do because I'm too sick to do it. So then I energetically had permission. And so it wasn't until I realized, oh, I don't have to be sick in order to take care of myself. Huge revelation. Seems pretty basic.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Seriously Human. I am Cayce Kolodney here to get serious about being human with my mom, Kelly Kolodney. And this is episode two, part two of initiations. In part one, we really focused on these external initiations that happened to Kelly in her life as she went on this spiritual path. And now, today, I really want to focus on the internal initiations of what were the variables happening on the inside and the inner work that initiated her into the next level of spiritual evolution. So, hey, Mom, how are you doing? Why don't we start with talking about internal initiations and what do you think about that concept versus an external initiation?
Hey, sweetheart. Well, we've talked a lot about all these really fun and magical stories that I guess could perceive right as external. And then there's all the stuff that goes on a deeper, more emotional or physical level that we haven't really touched on and that I usually don't share in a public forum, but are also incredibly valuable in the process of our evolution and our journey.
Yeah, and so in that, a lot of the times the things that are our internal initiations are a bit more vulnerable, wouldn't you say? And in that, do you feel that they're even more potent and powerful?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of rock you to your core sometimes. And when we're playing with, opening portals and Merlin appearing and the Divine Mother coming and going and all kinds of magic, that's playful and it's fun. And in it, it can get a little wild, like we mentioned in the last episode. So that is an initiation and it's intense. But when something's going on in our emotion, in our body, in our heart, um, that that's really a whole nother level. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for as someone who has gone through a lot of initiations physically, emotionally, and mentally, what advice would you give to someone who might feel like they're currently going through an initiation? Whether it's a health crisis, an emotional thing that they're dealing with, or some sort of repetitive thinking.
I mean, I would invite them to hang in, um, to really take a deep breath that whatever they're experiencing in this moment right now isn't going to be like that forever. When we're in the throes of it, especially if it's physical pain or emotional pain, our mind wants to put a time frame on it. When is this pain going to go away? When am I going to feel better? When is this grief going to end? And we want to like, have an expiration date. And sometimes there's a fear, like, I'm always going to feel like this. This is not going to get better. But it does. It does get better. And it does shift and we do evolve and we do grow and we do heal and we do release our grief. But just to give people a sense of hope, like, okay, if you're like in that dark night of the soul and you're in extreme pain or you're just like falling to the floor with grief right now, um, feel it, experience it, move through it, but know that you're not always going to be there.
Yeah, so well said. And something that we're going to get into today in this episode is about miracles and the miracles of healing that can happen physically and emotionally and etc. But what we learned from our last podcast about initiations that we're going to follow today is that these initiations, both internal and external, usually go in a specific sequence. A sequence of events that stack on top of each other, leading one to the next, to the next, to the next. And so I was wondering if you could bring us to back to the beginning of your journey of being initiated on a physical, emotional level and tell us, where were you at when you felt maybe you were at the beginning of your journey?
Hmm. That's really interesting because I think we're always the journey starts from our first breath, right? But how long does it take for us to be really conscious that we're on a journey and we're going through an initiation? I mean, we can have initiations in grade school, all along the way. But in terms of the spiritual piece of initiation, I think I mentioned when those beings came to me in France, that was a huge initiation it was a choice point, really, a decision to be made. And then the initiation of, okay, Raphael came into my body, and I said, another choice point, yes. Um, and then it just, continued so many different things that we've discussed. But for me, the one that I experienced in 2017, which is much more recent, was around my health, and that was also a big choice point. It was like I could continue emotionally and physically on the track that I was on, which is most likely going to lead to pretty severe debilitation and an inability to move forward, or I was going to have to make radical changes on many levels in order to really break through.
And so give us an idea of where you were at that point in the journey in 2017 before you had to make all these radical changes in your life, just so people might be able to relate to where they might be in their journey right now.
Well, I had done all the right things. I had married my young sweetheart from college. I had worked different jobs. I bought the sweet house in the suburbs. I had the two beautiful children who graduated from school or off to college, doing well. I took care of everybody. I was having family events and cleaning and cooking and, kind of picture perfect to the best of my ability, parties, whatever. I was having people come and I was channeling for them in person. Some people would come and I would just, give them sessions because I felt bad they couldn't pay for it. Lots of people giving, 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 giving. In fact, people would come sometimes to the house and have a big group come, and Raphael would literally put me on my knees and I would bless people and literally kiss their feet. Um, and just a lot of outpouring of energy, taking care of, giving, to the point of disrespect to myself and to my body, but not really aware of that. Just sort of, I think when I was a little girl, my mom put me on her lap. I was really young and something happened at school and I gave like some girl all my clothes who was didn't have anything. And my mom said, Kelly, you have a really, really big heart. And that's a beautiful thing. But if you're not careful and you don't take care of yourself, something is going to happen and you're going to be forced to. And I was a little girl and I didn't get that. But somehow I always remember her telling me that. And still, I just kept pushing and pushing. We had a lot of deaths in the family, and a lot of people needed medical care, needed emotional support, found myself at the hospital, taking care of people, exhausted. And it caught up with me. It just really caught up with me. And I started to develop this pain in my abdomen. And it was just unbearable. And it went on for a long time.
Right in your solar plexus.
Right in my solar plexus. And, I've been doing spiritual work since I was 20. So I got that it was my power center, but I wasn't really focusing on that. I was just focusing on, I have this pain. How am I going to get rid of it? Like, I can't deal with this. It has to go away. So I went to everyone, the healers, the acupuncturist, the medical doctor. I went to the medical doctor. They did a colonoscopy. They said, "You have Crohn's disease." And I was like flabbergasted. I'm like, "Oh my God, okay. So what do I have to do? I have to change what I eat? Like, what do I have to do?" And the guy looked at me, the doctor, and he said, what you eat has nothing to do with your digestive system. And I remember looking at him like, "You've got to be kidding, right? You're actually saying that?" He said, "So you need to come in once to twice a week and be on this intravenous drug. And that's the only thing that's going to help you." And then it was a fear tactic. And he's like, "And if you don't do that, it's going to grow to the point where you won't even be able to leave your house."
Right. And that was another choice point where you had the option to defer and give away your power to the greater system or choose to hold your power in a way. So that was kind of almost the first step in healing was to own your power there. Would you say so?
Yeah, I would. And I also want to be really clear, like if somebody is, I don't think in retrospect I actually had Crohn's disease. But if somebody does and they need to take that drug, I want to be really clear that I'm not in any way condemning that. That's a path that many have to take for whatever reason. But for me, it was just like everything in my body was like, no, it was a choice point for me. And I went home and I really cried. And I remember actually you were dating someone at the time and I talked to her mom and she was a nurse and she's like, "Oh no, you have to take the medicine. This is very serious. This can kill you." And I remember just crying myself to sleep and being like, "No, mm-mm, I'm gonna find a different way. I'm not doing that. I'm not going getting some drug in my arm twice a week." And so I just started researching and reading and ordering supplements and books. And the kitchen was like a room made of bone broth, you know. I was just
Uh,
like
An
bringing home things.
apothecary.
It was pretty wild. And, any healer I could get an appointment with, I was going. And I had lost a lot of weight at that time. I was barely eating anything because I was like afraid anything I ate was going to give me the pain. And so at some point, I started to have like a little bit of improvement, but the gnawing pain in my solar plexus, it just stayed. And one night I went to bed and I was really, really praying to the angel Raphael. And I was like, "Okay, come on, guys. Like, help me out here. I really could use a break." And I maybe like the angel energy would come, or my mom's sweet would show up and just kind of help me figure it out. But no, what arrived was a black Jaguar on my bed. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a real Jaguar, but it felt really real. It wasn't a dream, it was a full-blown vision. And I could feel like the paws on the bed and its eyes looking at me. And it just sort of like stared at me. And all I could hear was, "You need to reclaim your power or you're not going to make it."
Wow. And so, what was your response to the Jaguar in that moment? Did you feel like, okay, I know exactly how to do that? Or did it cause further panic of like, well, I'm trying, how do I do that? And how do I find assistance? What guidance was given to you in that moment?
So the next day I went to yoga to see my friend Maureen, and at the end she could see how much pain I was in. She just came over to me and it felt like an angel and she said, "You have to go and do Panchakarma." And I'm like, "Pancha what?" And she's like, "Panchakarma, Kelly, you got to go." And then there's this doctor, Indian doctor in Pittsburgh, and she's going to help you. I'm going to get you an appointment. You got to go. And I was like, "Okay, that's a 7-hour drive. I'm in agony. I don't know." But I was like, "I got to reclaim my power." And I remember Dad being like, "I'll drive you." And I said, "No, no, I have to do it myself." And I went there and it was snowing and miserable. And I had a couple treatments, but then I'd have to like drive back to my hotel room and it was just not working. But something in me knew that it was working, but I needed a different facility. And that's
Mhm.
when I found this place called the Raj. And I called this guy and I went there and you accompanied me there.
So you got this wake up call from the Jaguar that you needed to make a radical change. You didn't know what to do, but immediately following that, just because you were like, okay, I'm willing to change, the guidance to where to go became clear. But it wasn't crystal clear right away, but it was an Easter egg in the right direction.
Yeah, and I was determined to find an answer. Like I knew I had to keep following the breadcrumbs. So it got me started. And then I was like, okay, this feels good. I feel like this is going to help, but I need it to be a little different. I need to tweak it.
How did you know that it was helping versus something else that, like the medicine that you thought wasn't going to help? Why were you more open to one than the other? Was it something in your body? Was it a mindset? And how important do you think your mindset about things is going into anything regarding your health?
Oh, I mean, I think it's 90%. Like if you are battling with a terrible disease and you are really scientifically minded, medically minded, and you have 100% faith in a drug that's going to be given to you, and you go and take that, I think you have a really good chance of a success rate with it.
Mm,
Think that a lot of it has to do with our belief system. And if you believe that that's not going to work and this is going to work, I think there's a lot to that. But for me, in that moment, what it was is that my nervous system, which I didn't realize was so ramped up and so stressed, but I didn't get that, started to like take like I felt like this, oh, like I could just sort of settle a little. And then
mm.
when I got to the Raj and they started doing the work on me, tears were just pouring down my face in the first session. I'll never forget it. And it was like flashes of all those times I had blessed people and washed their feet and taken care of people and been at like all the caregiving. And I was like, oh, like I'm getting now nourished, like taken care of.
Right. And a big aspect of even being able to receive that was the calming of your nervous system. So, what would you say ramped up your nervous system in the first place?
I think that a lot, I mean, for me, this unrecognizable desire to make other people happy at the cost of my own well-being, which ultimately, under all of those layers, comes from a sense of probably unworthiness, not feeling enough. So if I overdo and really do everything I can to make sure, my sister's husband who's sick has my care every day at the hospital, or her grief has my attention, or my dying parents that I'm like, responsible right there, or make sure that my kids need me at any time, pick up the phone, take care of them, or nurture and make everything in its place and operating and going well to the point of exhaustion, really.
Right. And what I hear there is that it's also about control, right? Trying to control other people's feelings, trying to control that other people's needs are met, to control that other people like the party that you're throwing, that other people feel nurtured by the action that you're taking. And on some level, when you're trying to control things that are out of your control, of course it's going to, set your nervous system haywire because there's just no stability in that. There's no common reaction that will happen. There's no way to really get to know um, the real consequences of your actions are good or bad because it's all based off of something out of your control.
Yeah, and as you've said many times, I'm not giving from a place of a full cup. I was giving from a place of an unconscious need, a need to be loved. And then I had lost along the way my own internal power. I was seeking to receive that validation outside
Hmm.
of. And so once the recognition of that really started to come in, and I was like, oh, I have to prioritize myself. I have to have boundaries. I have to reclaim my power. And I remember it was like a year. I would go around, I'd be in the car and I'd be like, I am strong. I am powerful. I'm in my power. Like literally like this, especially around others in my life who were very powerful, and I felt invisible around or less than or dominated by. Before I would connect with certain people, I'd be like, I am powerful because I was so used to in certain dynamics being in the background and losing my voice. So that I
Mm,
had to do things sort of in the background to take care of everything to be loved. And once that clicked and I got that, then it's like all the energy that had been expelled in a certain way just started to dissipate. The healing and the pain went away. It just like lifted, like it was like pulled, like lifted out of me. And then all this power energy came in, and I
right.
could feel it flooding into my body, like literally like energy flooding into my body.
Right, but that was still a process from the moment of the Raj, right? There was still a lot to it, but to bring
Oh
us
yeah.
back to that moment in the Raj was before that you were in a give, give, give in an unconscious, maybe I'll get paradigm, right? There was a part of you that was giving to get, maybe not consciously, but unconsciously. And then
Definitely unconsciously, but yeah.
right. And then when you got to the Raj, you were finally able to receive without giving.
Total receiving.
And in that total receiving, you were able to heal because your nervous system was finally able to get what it was always trying to get without having to compromise or control things outside of your control. It just received.
Right. And then that's why, like, looking back at my visit with the doctor, and he's like not looking at me and typing on his thing and telling me it doesn't matter what I eat and filling out my prescription. That didn't feel like a healing match because I wasn't receiving anything there. There
Mm,
was nothing about that that was connected or nurturing or I care about you or you're going to be okay or we're going to figure this out. And there was none of that. There was no support. It was fear, driven. You either do this thing or you're going to get really, really sick and there's no option while not basically even looking at me. Very
right.
different
And
experience.
and so a big part of it was about just presence and attention. That was the thing that, you really needed to receive that was nurturing. And in those Panchakarma treatments, they're so present. There's so much attention. You're just being massaged or covered in oil or doing something where it's so in tune. And that was where the
Mhm.
real healing came from because when others are present with you, it gives you an opportunity to truly practice presence with yourself.
Exactly. When you're present with yourself, that which you don't want to look at starts to surface. And that's what will have and have an opportunity to be healed because it can't be any longer hidden. And that's one of the things that happens in Panchakarma is that after 3 or 4 days in, people become very emotional because emotion that is stored in the cells and then in the tissues and in the memory start to have an opportunity to unwind and to come up to the surface.
Right. So I think this is a great opportunity to talk about the relationship of emotions to the symptoms of physical disease and what that relationship is. And do you have anything that you want to say about that, just so that we can get clarity of your view on it?
I mean, I've asked, of course, this to Raphael, or Raphael has said it without being prompted or asked, that everything that's happening in the form in the body and matter, like in our bones, tissues, and organs, before it can descend there into a pathology, it's happening on an etheric level and then on an emotional level, and then it eventually drops into the body. So once it's come into the body, then we have to address the symptom, but there's always an emotional component. And like, I know that a lot of like back in the 50s or 60s, or maybe even today, women especially, maybe go to the doctor and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's emotional, or you're depressed, or it's hysteria and all this stuff. And people get really, really angry about that. And understandably so, because you're having physical symptoms. And those symptoms are incredibly real and they need to be physically addressed and understood. And there's also often things that are going on in the body that most traditional medicine can't even begin to understand. But for me, and what my process over all these years is that you can't divorce the physical and the emotional, that the emotional piece has to be addressed always.
And so you used the word divorce there. So I want to ask you, what kind of marriage counseling did you do with your emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual body to make sure that they were all, in a happy relationship?
Mean prior to getting sick or at this
No, as
point?
part of your healing journey.
Oh, I did a lot of writing, a lot of journaling, a lot of talking to my body parts, communicating with them, asking them what they need, finding a relationship to them, listening. Mm, you know, Noticing that if I repress, push down, push down, push down, it has to go somewhere.
Hmm.
And for me, I process things that I can't process in other ways in my body. And then it comes up. If I'm having an emotional stress or concern about something, my nature is, oh, I don't want to ruffle the feathers or upset somebody. And so I'll swallow it. And I had swallowed so much that I had like this much in my solar plexus. And my solar plexus was like, we can't digest anymore. Like literally my digestive system was like, no, we're not working. Like I can't digest that. And so I had to unravel it and literally digest it in another way and clear it.
Yeah, which is so interesting. And a way that I like to work with this stuff often is to imagine that these aspects of self were real people that I was in a relationship with. And so let's say there was um, a part a part of me or a person that had a need. And because I was at a certain party or doing a certain thing, I just ignored their need. I said, "Shut up for now. Just deal with it. We're at a party." Right? If I do that enough times, that person would become extremely angry, resentful, and in real life would probably leave me, but since it's part of me, it can't. And so then it would act out, right? And in a lot of ways, if you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you look at these health issues, if you put them as people, it's just aspects of yourself acting out just the way any other person would if they were related to in the way that you're treating them.
Hmm. I love that. It's so true. And see, that's where we come into relationship with, those parts and have dialogue. And sometimes it's literally, I need to have a relationship with my heart or my lungs or my throat or my bladder or my liver.
Right. And so it's interesting if we go back to the Raj that the first step of being able or willing to repair and engage in that relationship was calming your nervous system. Because
Mm.
before calming your nervous system, you couldn't even think about the relationship.
No, because I was so like, this pain has to go away. I was so distressed by the physical pain level, which was at like a 10, that I didn't have any space to, even if I understood, okay, there must be an emotional component and I got to address it. I couldn't even, I'm like, well, that's great, but everything was directed at dealing with the pain. All my energy was like trying to, how am I going to get rid of this pain? I didn't have the bandwidth or the
Hmm.
spaciousness to allow the emotional part to even have its life.
Right. So now take us through what happened once you were able to have the bandwidth to visit these things. How did you get to that point that you were talking about where all of this power flooded in and the pain went away? Can you bring us through the rest of that journey, step by step?
Well, after, the treatments would be done, I'd be in my room, and I remember this one moment where someone that I had am in a relationship with, a family member, came into my awareness so strong, and I just like yelled and screamed and talked to them and like I just really went for it. And I had this huge release with this person. And then it was like a layer, it was like I un I was peeling away something. And then I would go and have more treatments and do my thing and meditate and take a walk. And then the emotion would come up and somebody else would come in. And then I would have the same guttural, deep need to like communicate, clear, write, yell, scream, cry. And I'd feel another layer and another layer. And then I just started to like really let go and unwind so much that had just accumulated, like we all have over a lifetime, that had caused like literally like a fist that was tight like this inside that was like stabbing at me. And as those layers started to release, it just slowly the clenching and the contracted energy started to soften and open, and then eventually the pain disappeared.
And so in your case, the pain was able to disappear as you expressed what it was, what the needs were, what boundaries needed to be held, etc. Even if it wasn't directly in the physical realm with that person, just the visualization of expressing it to that person allowed for a deep release.
Yeah, I would go into my higher self, invite their higher self, and just have a full-blown thing. I didn't need to, like the first person I'm thinking of, me having that dialogue with them in real life probably wouldn't go well. Um, and isn't really necessary. But what I found remarkable was that the next time I saw them at an event, they were so much more open and receptive and connected, and things felt so much better. And all of the work that had just been done was done in the etheric realm with their higher self. It wasn't anything, any dialogue in this world, but they got it on an energetic level, and a clearing happened. Yeah.
So amazing. So I guess the next aspect that I want to talk about here is how did this relate on an ancestral level? How do these patterns move from mother to daughter, daughter, you know, or father to daughter, or father to son, etc.? And where do you see a mirror of these patterns? And do you think that that's part of our karmic lineage to have that passed down until someone, finally figures out how to clear it?
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's interesting that the Jaguar came to me during that time. And I have another physical issue that's chronic that I'm working on right now. And I just had a conversation um, with your sister, and I was like, oh, it's really important that what I'm experiencing, she doesn't start to experience. And I know that what I'm experiencing in this particular physical issue I'm having right now descends from my mother's line for 100%.
Hmm.
And so, as much as I want to heal this for myself, I also want to heal it for her, right? So that it doesn't need to continue. And I had an experience, I guess in many ways, the Jaguar is my totem that, although doesn't show up very often at all, only showed up then, came into my reality again just a few weeks ago. And I think has really come in order to tell me it's time for another initiation, another shift.
Mm, hmm. And
But this
so,
time the Jaguar was an actual Jaguar.
yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, it was so much fun. So I was in Mexico with Debishri. We were on a magic trip preparing for the Choice Point Light Code. And we were in this underground river. We were doing all these magical things. And then we got one night, I was really not feeling well. I was really big surprise, right?
Hmm.
Supposed to go to Chichen Itza, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to go. So she had to go herself. And then when she came back, she said, well, we have to find these shamans and we need to find someone to help us get into the underground river tomorrow. And we need a phone case and we need like all these things that we needed. And I was like, okay. I said, don't worry about it. I'm going to figure it out. It's all going to just come to us. She was like, huh, okay. So I went to sleep.
Great. You just
I,
don't want to move. That's probably what
you don't
she's
want to
thinking.
move. But I was like, no, no, no. So I put like roots down, into the
Mm-hmm.
earth. And I energetically, I don't want to use the word summon, but kind of, I was like, okay, I need a guide to bring me into the underground river. I need two phone cases so we can go in there and take pictures. I need to connect with a shaman and this jaguar energy, but I don't want to leave my hotel. So I'm not feeling well. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
universe. So in the morning, She's like, okay, well, it's time to go to breakfast. And I'm like, great. So we're at breakfast. And she's like, so what's the plan? Like, did you line up a shaman? And I'm like, yep, I got it all handled. It's gonna come to us.
Yep.
So we're sitting at breakfast, and she gets this text of somebody who's going to be able to take us into the underground river. We're like, oh, this is amazing. So she calls this person, and we're in this like restaurant, and there's maybe 25 tables in there, but there's only two tables in the restaurant that are having breakfast. And she calls this person, and she's talking to them, and she realizes that he's sitting at the table next to us. Good job right there. I didn't have to go anywhere. So then we're talking to him, and he's talking to these two people from Japan, and we're telling a story. We're going the underground river, and they're like, "That's so crazy!" But we happen to have two phone cases, and we can lend them to you. But we're only here today. We're like, "Great!" There was 400 rooms at this place, and we're like, "What's your room number?" Of course, it was next to ours, right? Right next door. So we get the phone cases, and we don't tell anything about the guy that we're working with Jaguar medicine. And he meets us down at the underground river to go in, and he brings us two Jaguar t-shirts as gifts, like out of nowhere. We're like, this is perfect. So we put the Jaguar teacher down, t-shirt down on the ground. And then usually we have all kinds of ceremonial paraphernalia that we've brought from home and that we prepare, but we didn't. But all of a sudden we find that, he has some kapal and he has a beautiful vessel, and we find some feathers and some stones. The next thing you know, we have this gorgeous altar, and I channel, and we have the magic egg, and I bring in Raphael, and Raphael talks about jaguar medicine and all the stuff about the jaguar, and it's super magical, and we're finished. And Debashri goes into the water, she drops the magic egg, we're all done. And then he says, oh, but there's this shaman that wants to see you tonight, but you have to go to his place, and it's at like 11 at night. And Debashree's like, that guy's not going to show up. And I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. So we get a phone call at like 10:45. The shaman's ready to see you. We get in the car, we drive around a little bit. We get a phone call. No, he can't meet with you. So we're coming back to this place at pretty late, like 11. As we're walking along the path, a jaguar, like a real live jaguar, a baby one, crosses our path. And we stop. I think Devashri was like, if that mother's nearby, we're screwed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. It was a cub.
It was a cub. But yeah, we don't know where mama is. And so then we kind of like just watch it. We had enough like sense of ourselves to back away. We did get a video of it, and we go back to the reception, and we're like, there's a jaguar baby and they're like, oh my God, that happens like once a decade. It's very rare, but sometimes. And then they're like bowing, like, you're so blessed because it's such an honor in their tradition. It means this huge blessing, right?
Mm.
And so they're like, do you want a golf cart back to your room? We're like, yeah, I think so. But we had brought it in, the medicine. And it's interesting that it's Jaguar medicine.
Right.
I had never put that together before. And so that's where this came from, this Jaguar Raphael, my solar plexus. See my hands there?
Mm.
Because stepping into personal power. And that's the light code, right? Stepping into personal power and
Right.
using this powerful, ferocious. The Jaguar is observant. He waits. He takes his
Mm-hmm.
time. He assesses. He's at the top of the chain. He's the apex animal. He's powerful, fierce, but it's like a fierce love to heal, And in the Mayan tradition, he's everywhere. He's everything. He takes care of the underworld, right?
Mm.
And so that in the past might have been something I had feared, that root chakra, sacral, solar plexus. I'd always lived up here in my crown, in my third eye, with the angels in the celestial realm. But I've been asked to like ground. And I think that the next initiation for me on a physical level has to do with both my root and sacral chakra.
Right, very interesting. And so I really like that the medicine was brought up. And I know that we had discussed previously that what if these illnesses aren't really diseases at all, but are actually medicine to balance us out. And in a way, they can sometimes unconsciously be used as crutches for to give us power when we don't have the power yet ourselves, or the tools, or the faculties. And so I wanted to get your read on that idea first, and then I have one more thing that I want to ask.
Yeah, I think that that was the real lesson was that unconsciously I didn't feel safe enough to say no to people. And so when I got overwhelmed and it was just too much and I had given too much, my body would get sick and then I couldn't do it. So, sorry, I can't do that thing that you need me to do because I'm too sick to do it. So then I energetically had permission. And so it wasn't until I realized, oh, I don't have to be sick in order to take care of myself. Huge revelation, seems pretty basic. Um, that I really shifted my healing journey.
Right. And so, in a way, because you didn't take care of yourself for so long, the sickness came in order to take care of you
Mm,
because you weren't doing it yourself.
I love that. So it's a gift.
Right. And the next question that I have is, it's so important that we support people in their healing process of coming back into balance, of stepping back into their power, of not repeating the continuous cycle. And so, with all the wisdom that you've gathered and the expressions that you've had and the things that you've learned, what really would you say to somebody right now who might be going through the same patterns you were as a younger woman? What would you say to them, or as if you were going to say to your daughter, about what to remember and what they need to do to step into their power to move through this so that they don't need that gift to come their way?
Yeah, I have a few women in my life that I love very much, and I can see myself in them. They're running around doing so much to the point of depletion. They don't look healthy or well. And I worry, and I say to them, I'm begging you, stop. Just stop. It's not important. What's really important is just taking care of yourself, nurturing yourself, prioritizing things, letting go of some things that maybe don't have to be done in reality, that we think we have to do, or really aren't that important, but we've told ourselves in our mind that they are important. And the most important thing, especially as a mother and for your children, is if you can figure that out early on, they don't really need you to be at every thing as much as they need you whenever you are somewhere to be well, you know? And so I regret that. I mean, I don't regret, I guess, because it unfolded the way it unfolded, because it was perfect and it had to be, but that I hadn't really gotten it sooner because there's fallout. I know that for me as a kid, my mom was sick my whole childhood and it had repercussions on me. It was hard. And I can only imagine that that same thing has shown up for you and your sister of having to cope with that and probably seeing it and not being able to say, just stop, take care of yourself. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right. And so, what do you say to somebody who says, I don't have time to do that? Right. Because there are all these other things that do matter.
Yeah, well then you can say that, but eventually the universe is going to slap you around and then you're really not going to have time to do anything at all because you're going to be flat in your bed and unable to do it.
Right.
So either you do it now or you wait until you're forced to do it.
And your health has to be your number one priority, because if you aren't healthy and you aren't there, you can't do anything for anyone anyway. And it's interesting, and I know that we talked about this before, but so often somebody who tends to have a people pleaser tendency has a need for everyone else's needs to be met. That's what they need. They need others' needs to be met. But what
Hmm.
if the people in your life also have that same need? You'll never be able to meet their need no matter how hard you try to do it if you're not meeting your own need. And wouldn't it be fair of them to have the same need, the same human need that you have?
Definitely. And that's a big one, right? To have that realization.
Right.
And and it also what it can bring up for a lot of people, especially those who are people pleasers and they're give and give and give and give. I think what coincides with a people pleaser can also be a victim mentality and a poor me. I did all of this. I took care of everyone. I whatever, 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 even if they're not verbalizing it, right? And poor me. Now that I need the support or the help or whatever it is, nobody's there. It's interesting.
Right. And another thing that we've talked about before is the idea of protecting people from your own resentment by meeting your needs. And the example is if I don't meet my needs now because I'm going beyond myself and violating my own boundaries, needs, wants, desires, etc., to meet yours, eventually I'm going to build resentment. And then I will have resentment towards that person when they didn't really do anything besides allow me to do the thing that I was going to do because they asked
Exactly.
me.
Yeah,
And
right?
so if
It's
you
up to
don't want
you
to
to
be
stop.
right, and so if you don't want to be selfish and you want to actually be helpful, you need to make sure that you are protecting other people from your negative emotions that will come up towards them in your attempt to please them for a moment.
Hmm. And to overgive. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And so the last thing that I want to talk about is for people that might feel hopeless in a moment and all of the logical linear paths seem impossible. Let's talk about miracles and the miracles of healing that have happened that you've witnessed and what really goes into the equation of creating a miracle.
I mean, miracles for me are around trusting and belief and a deep inner knowing, right? That it's possible. And so if you can, when you wake up in chronic pain, all you can think about is the pain. And until you can operate in a different frequency by refocusing your energy toward gratitude of what is working, or toward the possibility of stillness where you can drop into the emptiness where there's nothing, even if the pain is somewhere in the background, you're not able to spiral upward into the creational process. And once you can enter that space, you can begin to feel the frequency of that in which you are wanting to experience, and then you can merge with it, and that becomes the miracle.
Okay. And can you give us an example of that?
Hmm. I mean, there's been times in my life where sometimes we allow the pain in, like we have, it's almost as if we don't have time to deal with it in the moment and it can seep in. And there's other times when we're like, no, Debishri, who I work with closely, will say, just fix it. Like she just fixes things. And it's like you, in the moment, it's starting to happen. You just say, no, like I'm not going there, and you attune to the frequency of the visualization that you are whole, that you are well, but then you have to step into those shoes and with absolute complete faith that that is true. But if there is this little inkling of belief that it's not true or something lingering there. It's almost like you're opening a doorway and it can flood in the disease. And so, like, I've had moments where I remember actually being in Germany after having all this surgery on my mouth. And even that was a miracle. I had to have tons of surgery on my mouth, and I flew to Switzerland for that, on the border of Switzerland and Germany. And I did all this preparatory work ahead of time. I made symbols. I put the symbols behind my bed. I worked on my mouth. I talked to my mouth. I talked about what it was going to be like afterwards because there were all these scenarios of all the things that could go wrong and how sick I could be for months after. And I just made a decision. No, I'm going to go in. They're going to do it. It's going to be done. I'm going to come home. It's going to be fine. And it totally just was.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes, it's the seeping in of doubt or information or a diagnosis or someone telling you something that can just take hold. It can take grip in your energetic field. But if you can capture it, before it takes grip, it's so much easier. You don't necessarily have to go down that path. But if
Right.
you're weak and stressed and emotional, it's like a weakened immune system, but it's in a weakened emotional system and it can take hold. And then it can take longer to untangle.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear here that the thing that you're disengaging from isn't necessarily the pain or the disease itself, but the story around it. The
Mm.
story of, is it going to get better? What are all the things that are going to happen? Because in order to move through any of these illnesses or anything in your life, the most important thing is to be able to accept and face reality as it is. And sometimes we think that our story is in reality, the story that the doctor was telling you about how it had to be. That isn't reality, that was just a story. And when we let go of the stories and come to face the facts, which the facts are, they've given me a diagnosis that may or may not be right. I have a severe pain in my stomach and my nervous system needs to be calmed down. Those are the facts. And if we can stay in the present moment with those things and let go of all of the stories and all of the narratives of how we're not going to be able to do this or that's not going to work or here are all the possibilities that could happen, that's when we can really allow the healing to begin. And so it's not believing that reality doesn't exist. It's about letting go of the stories, which that's what doubt is. Doubt is just a story. Miracles don't defy reality, they defy the predictable story from one moment to another. A miracle is the
Yeah.
reality of I was this way and now I am that way, and there's no story in between. Miracles time jump our linear mind stories that we make up of what needs to happen in order to deliver an outcome.
Hmm. And they're always right there, waiting for us to engage in them.
Indeed. All right. I think that wraps it up for initiations, don't you think?
Well, I've got many more, but it was a good start for sure. Yeah, we can move into working with abundance if you want next week, or whatever
All
you
right.
decide, whatever you
Sounds
want.
good. We'll move into synchronicity, magic, and abundance next week on Seriously Human. We'll see you then.
All right, love you, honey.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye bye.